Hello and welcome back to another week of Learn with Jabe. I'm Jabe Jabelson, and this week we are diving into the world of Spotify. Now, who doesn't love the viral Spotify Wrapped that comes out every year around Christmas time? And that's great and all, but what about the other 364 days of year? Wouldn't you love to see your Spotify Wrapped whenever you want? Well, good news is we are going to build our own Spotify Wrap in this tutorial. We are going to be doing this in Python using the Spotipy and GSpread packages to access the Spotify API and Google Sheets API. We'll be writing our code in a Jupyter notebook. I'll make sure to link to the GitHub repo in the details. And we're basically going to be connecting a couple APIs that inserts data into our Google Sheet. And then we'll be using a no-code favorite of mine, Glide, to create our front-end app, which you can then pull up whenever you want and get your Wrapped every day of the year. Nom, 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 nom. So, without further ado, bon appetit! Okay, so first thing we are going to want to do is get our users' top artists and tracks. Now, Spotify has some great documentation which makes you think they really care about their developers. And there's this very specific endpoint which we'll be using that's going to make things really easy for us. This is really just the personalization engine that Spotify has, and it's going to help us get a user's top artists and tracks. We'll start with just tracks, but eventually maybe add on artists later on. So looking at the documentation, there's really only two things that are required. We have the authorization and the path parameter type. Everything else is optional, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Now to begin, you're going to want to create a Spotify developer account, and what we're going to be doing is creating an app. You can go to the dashboard and you can log in. And you see here I have a couple Spotify apps that I've done in the past. But really what we're going to do is we'll create a new one for the tutorial. And we got to give it an app name. Let's call it My Spotipy Wrapped. Custom Spotify Wrapped that works via APIs. Then we're going to go ahead and sign away our lives to Spotify, but I trust them. They seem like good people. And we'll go ahead and create. And so here what we're going to have is our client ID, and then go ahead and show your client secret. Now these are going to be key when we are authorizing later on. I will likely reset it if I remember. If not, have at it, hackers, to enjoy my client secret. After creating the app, we're also going to want to go to the edit settings. And what we're going to do is look at this redirect URI. Now, we need this for Spotify to redirect us back after we've authorized, after we've kind of given it the go-ahead that you can use our account and access our data to read what our top tracks are. So for our purposes, let's go with http://127.0.0.19090. This is just going to be your local storage, local files. Go ahead and add that, and then we can hit save. Okay, let's jump into our Jupyter notebook where we're going to go through this cell by cell. To start, we're going to want to import some of the necessary modules. You need to pip install Spotipy. Should be straightforward because what we're going to do is access the Spotify OAuth class. So let's go ahead and run this, and then what we're doing is we are passing in, we have these needed parameters, the client ID, the client secret, and the redirect URI. And you might be asking, how do we know this is what's needed? If you go to the Spotipy GitHub, and again, I will try and pronounce Spotipy instead of Spotify, we see in this class that the client ID, the client secret, and the redirect URI must be supplied. Now, another one, the scope is optional. So here we see the scope, I passed the user top read. Now, what is that and how did I know to include it? Well, if we go back to the Spotify documentation, we see as part of the authorization to use this endpoint, we need the user top read scope. So what we'll do is we'll pass it in. Again, I've replaced all of my own information. You would put in your own client ID and client secret that you got from the app. So I passed in my own client ID and client secret, and that same redirect URI that I'd mentioned before, which is going to allow us to access it on the local host. Let's run that. And so next what we are doing is initializing this SP object by calling Spotipy. We're passing in the OAuth class and setting everything that's needed: the client ID, the client secret, the redirect URI, and then the optional scope. So this is now sending all of this information through Spotipy to Spotify. That's a tongue twister. And we'll save it into this SP object, which now we can reference. We have gained access into our own account. Or have we? Let's take a look. Now, if we go back to the Spotipy documentation and we see this get user top artist function, that's really the wrapper around this API endpoint. And here what it's going to do is we see the limit, the offset, and the time range, which are all passed as optional. We just need to make sure we have the authorization. Now, the first time you run this, you are going to be redirected to your local host, which will ask you to then sign into Spotipy, where you'll thereby be granting access to get your top track read-only data. Since I've already run it once, it's not going to happen for me, but it should be expected, and you should see more of this in the blog post. So if we run this, great. And then if we were to print just top track short, we see this long JSON blob of a lot of blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. But let's actually run this one more time, but I want to get the top 20 songs instead. So let's overwrite it. We'll run this again, and now it has the top 20 rather than just the top 10. And so if we look at our type top tracks short, we'll see that it's a dictionary. And so with a dictionary, that means we need to get some of that nested information that we're after, which we'll use in our Glide app. So what we can do is create a new function, because we're really after track IDs, and I'll explain a little bit more in a minute, but really Spotipy can use a track ID to get track features, and those track features we can then go and get some of the information. And so here what we'll be doing is passing in some time frame dictionary, which in this case will be short, and we'll start an empty list of track IDs, and for each song in that dictionary, let's go and get the item, and within that we'll get the track ID, which is going to be the song ID. We'll see down here the ID, so we're really after that, and we'll return the list of track IDs. And so we can take this, and then what we'll do is we'll say track IDs equal to get track IDs, and let's pass in this top track short, which again should be 20 songs. And if we run that, great, and let's actually print this out, and what we have are the 20 track IDs. Great, making some progress here. So let's just pick one of these. Track ID equals, and we'll take that first one, which is should be my most listened to track, no judgment hopefully. And again, like I said, we want to get some of the track features. So we're going to go a level further into this nested dictionary. And here I have a new function, get track features. And what we're going to do again is use that same SP object that we had created up here, that Spotipy object, and that allows us to get the track, use the Spotipy track call that takes in a track ID. And then from there, we're going to get some metadata information about it. We'll get the name. I want the album name. I want the artist's name. So you'll see that means within the album, there should be these artists, and within the artists, I want to take that first one and get that name, because sometimes there's more artists featured. I want to get the Spotify URL. So this is the link that if clicked on would open the song directly in Spotify, which we'll use as part of our Glide app. And then I want to get the album cover, because we want to have some fun visuals, which again, within that meta information, I'm going to get a URL likely hosted on some S3 object, but we can reference it later. And And then let's save all of this track info into a new list and return it. So again, if we run this, and if I were to run the get track features function we just wrote, and let's pass in that first track ID, and that's because it's features, we see the #1 song that I've been listening to is Peaches by Justin Bieber on the album Justice. This should open the song in Spotify, and this should open an album cover. Let's go ahead and test that out quickly. Voila. So that worked for just one of them, but really what we want to do is loop over all of our track IDs, and what we're going to do is save it to a data frame. So we're going to create a new empty list of tracks, and then in the length of the track ID, so that will say however long this is, whether it's 10, 20, whatever you want it to be. I think the max is 50. It will go for the entire length until it's finished, and we'll sleep in between each one for half a second to make sure Spotify doesn't think we're up to anything fishy. I want to go and get the track features for that track ID, save it to this track variable, and append that track to the empty tracks. Great, so now let's run that. Awesome, and then what happens if I print tracks? I now have a more manageable list of lists, which we can then convert into a data frame. And how do we turn that into a data frame? By passing this PD data frame, pass in our list of lists, and let's give them the column names we want. So let's run this, and then let's print the first 5. And we see now we have a nice data frame with all of our information. Lovely. So this is what we're going to insert into our Google Sheets. Okay, so for the Google Sheets, we're going to be using GSpread. Now, I'm not going to go into the whole installation process here. Very similar to Spotipy and Spotify, to where we have to authorize. And so what you're going to do is you're going to go through, add the proper credentials. Again, that's in the blog post tutorial. I'll take you step by step there. But ultimately what we're after is this JSON file, which will have our appropriate Google Sheet and say, hey, you can now do whatever you want, read, write to this Google Sheet. I hereby grant you access. And so similar to how the Spotipy we saved to that SP object, we're going to create one for GSpread and save it to this GC object. So let's see what happens if we run this. And an important reminder to always import our modules before we use them. Great, so now we have this GC object that we have authorized. And what we're going to do is I'm going to use the open function and pass in the name of my Google Sheet, which is called My Spotify Wrap. Now you can also use the ID if you would rather. You can pull this GID in case you rename things. I'm not planning to rename this, so I'll just go with the Spotify Wrapped. And we're saying open and then saving this to this sheet object. So we run that. And of course, what I'm actually after is a tab within that sheet object. And our tabs are called worksheets in GSpread. And I'm after that short-term tab. So again, I've named them all short-term, medium-term, long-term, which will match the exact variable name we use in our function. You'll thank me later. This is going to simplify things. And so if I run that, great. Now we have access to a worksheet. And what I'm going to do is in B5, I'm going to write this find me, so I have some value there. And then we'll come in and we will find that value in our worksheet, which is our short-term worksheet, and get a cell, which will be B5, and then let's print it. And we see we were able to get that information. Great. So what we actually want to do, though, is come in and insert in our data frame into that sheet. And we can do that with this call, which is basically worksheet update our data frame columns values to lists plus our data frame values to a list. And that's just going to update the worksheet we're working on. So let's go ahead and use the function I had created, which is called insert to gsheet. And this is going to take track IDs, a list of track IDs. We're going to loop over them and get our track features, which we had already defined above before. We're going to create that data frame. And then we are going to authorize, open Spotify Wrapped, and insert it into the worksheet. Now you'll see here, I replaced the name of the sheet with the time period because we are actually going to loop over all of the different time ranges because I want to have 3 tabs in the Glide app. And I changed this just to DF instead of data frame. But for each one, it will loop over, grab the worksheet of the time period, and insert in that new data to our Google Sheet. So let's run this function. And like I mentioned before, Spotify has 3 different time range variables: short term, medium term, and long term. We're going to get each of them and add them into each of the 3 sheets we've created in our Google Sheet. So I'll put those time ranges in a list. For the time period in the time ranges, we are going to get the user's top tracks. Again, passing in that time period variable, which is going to be the short term, medium term, long term. We will get that list of track IDs by calling our getTrackIDs function, passing in those top tracks we had just gotten, and then we're going to take those track IDs, which is a list of track IDs, and run this variable, run this function, insert to gsheet. So let's see what happened. Done, done, and done. Let's go to our Google Sheet. We have all of our short-term info, all of our medium-term info, and all of our long-term info. Awesome. Let's now create the Glide app. Okay, Glide is this awesome no-code tool that, as you see here, allows us to build an app from a Google Sheet in 5 minutes for free. And believe me when I say we are going to do this in less than 5 minutes. So let's log in. And what I'll do is I'll create a new app. We're going to use Google Sheets. And I'm going to sign in with Google. We know a little something about authorization, do we not? And then you're going to select your Spotify Wrapped Google Sheet. Should automatically pull things in for us. Awesome. So we have our 3 tabs, short, medium, and long term. And what we're going to do is update the labels. We'll say recent for this one. Let's change this icon to something a little bit more associated with time. And then you're going to come over and use the cards. And let me move my little bubble over to the left. And let's go in and edit list. Image is actually going to be the album cover. Let's have no header. We'll call the title the name, and the details will be the artist. Let's go with that 2x3 vertical. Let's go with the horizontal swiping cards, a little bit fancier today. And the last thing we want to do is this action in the view details. Let's actually go to open link. And again, we're passing in that Spotify URL. If we were to click on any of these songs, it automatically kicks us over to Spotify where it opens the song and starts playing automatically. Great. And then under options, let's remove the search bar. We don't need any search in here. We'll go over to general, and we're going to rinse and repeat for the medium and long term. Great. Now you can come up to here, and again, you'll see it's referencing this information we get from our Google Sheet, just calling in the different rows and columns and the values within that. Again, this is an awesome tool. I highly encourage you to play around with it more. Let's go over to our appearance. I am going to go more with that green, that Spotify green, and I am a sucker for dark mode, the bold dark mode. We'll keep that system, show the tab labels. Why not increase contrast? Always good to have accessibility. App info. I'm going to go ahead and upload. Go ahead and upload my logo. Let's call it my Spotipy Wrapped. This is under my pseudonym, Jabe Jabelson. Description, your Spotify Wrapped whenever you want. Cool. Since this is public, we're not paying for Glide. We can't do a lot of the pro features, but if you go ahead and publish this, we'll publish the app, and then what you can do is you can type in your phone number, send it, or scan the QR code, and there you have it. You'll be able to play around with it right on your phone. So there you have it, your very own Spotify Wrap built with APIs from Google Sheet and Python. Now, after you receive the text message, you'll see that you want to go ahead, if you have iOS, tap that middle button and then go ahead and add to home screen. So now you have the app is one click away. And if you open that, you'll see anytime you can flip through all of your songs, your favorite songs over the different time periods. And anytime you click it, it should open you right into that Spotify app and start playing the song. Again, you saw my can't miss or can't get enough of song right now is Peaches by Justin Bieber. For whatever reason, hope you enjoy the tutorial. I will link to the blog post and the GitHub repo in the notes. We may build on this in the future, we shall see. But again, I am Gabe Jabelson, signing